The United States and Iran are nearing an agreement to end the war as negotiations move towards the final stages. Pakistani mediators say the text of a memorandum of understanding between Washington and Tehran has been reached. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif says the parties are closer to a deal than at any point before. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi is also signaling progress. He says that a deal would be implemented in 2 phases, with Tehran's nuclear program to be addressed later.
So what I would say now is that in the negotiations that will lead to the end of the war, there are 2 phases. The first one, there is an MOU signed by Iran and America. And later on, negotiations for the second phase will start, and in the second phase we will come to a final agreement. Now the topic of the nuclear issue has been postponed to a final agreement. And there are different reasons for this. I cannot discuss that. The demands were not acceptable. So there were issues on which we could agree. So we said in the first phase we'll do this, and for the nuclear story, it'll take 60 days. That's what's anticipated. The second phase of the final agreement will be covering sanctions removals and the nuclear program, and 1 or 2 other issues.
This comes as the U.S. Central Command accused Iran of launching attack drones in the Strait of Hormuz. Washington says several drones attacked commercial shipping in the strategic waterway. We have correspondents standing by in Washington, D.C. and Beirut, and we will hear from them shortly. But first, let's go to Tohid Asadi, who joins us from the Iranian capital of Tehran. So, Tohid, tell us what we're hearing from Iranian officials about this memorandum of understanding and what it might contain.
Well, actually, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, in an interview, in a relatively lengthy interview with the state TV, tried to touch upon a wide spectrum of issues regarding the forthcoming memorandum of understanding, saying that it is quite close to be signed, but still it is under consideration inside the country, waiting for confirmation and approval from the highest authorities, including the Supreme National Security Council and the supreme leader of the country. However, we know that we're not talking about an all of a sudden agreement to resolve all the issues, as Araghchi said that it's going to pave the way for a period of 60 days for the 2 sides to sit further and talk about other remaining sticking points. And that brings us to a very important point in that regard. We know that some of the issues are said to be initially agreed, but still there are remaining points of contention and differences of opinion regarding certain issues. As Foreign Minister said that, for example, when it comes to the nuclear dossier of the country, removal of sanctions in that regard, and 1-2 other remaining issues, there are also, let's say, further controversies that throughout the course of these 60 days, the 2 sides are going to sit down to talk. Also, he said that the continuation of this process is going to be dependent upon how the 2 sides fulfill their commitments based upon the first deal or the first memorandum of understanding. So at this time, we know that engulfed by a cloud of uncertainty and mistrust, Iran has decided to go through the trajectory of diplomacy, while also we hear that the fingers are on the triggers in case negotiations fail. And also we heard from Araghchi talking about the Strait of Hormuz. In that regard, he said that it's not going to get back to the time before the war when it comes to actually the management system of transiting through this geostrategically significant choke point. Also, Araghchi talked about the U.S.-imposed naval blockade, saying that one of the conditions, one of the terms in this agreement is actually the removal of this naval blockade, as well as the ceasefire across the region, particularly in Lebanon, about which he said that we are not going to leave Lebanon alone. So all in all, we know that this is a positive indication, no small spot of hesitation on that, but the road to diplomacy still remains challenging.
Okay, Al Jazeera's Tohid Asadi reporting live for us from Tehran. Let's bring in Mike Hanna now, who joins us from Washington, D.C. Mike, closer than a deal has ever been to this point is pretty optimistic, and we're hearing it from both sides. But are we hearing more at all from the Trump administration about why that is?
No, there haven't been many details forthcoming. We did hear from President Trump earlier yesterday that he rejected the interpretations of the memorandum of understanding that were coming from Iran, saying that they were, in his words, a fake news. And yet the administration has not provided us with any details as to exactly what in that memorandum of understanding, and also whether or not it is in fact a two-phase memorandum or a two-phase process, as many reports have indicated, and at one stage the US indicated that that was the case as well. But President Trump veers between expressing optimism and between once again resorting to threats should the deal not take place. But above all, he seems intent that this is going to happen, and it could happen as early as next week, as some of the members of his staff are saying. So although there are still the doubts surrounding the actual nature of the deal, as far as the White House is concerned, yes, the deal is close, if not imminent.
Okay, Al Jazeera's Mike Hanna reporting live for us from Washington. Thank you, Mike. Israel has continued its attacks across southern Lebanon. This is the aftermath of some of the latest strikes in the region of Tyre. Separate attacks targeted the city of Nabatea and the town of Balat on Friday. Israel also issued new forced displacement orders for 3 towns in the south. Hezbollah says that it is targeting Israeli troops with drones and rockets. Let's go to Al Jazeera's Heidi Pett now, who joins us live from Beirut. So, Heidi, despite the optimism that a memorandum of understanding is forthcoming and that it will include a ceasefire in Lebanon, what does the situation look like today?
We've had renewed Israeli military activity just in the last couple of minutes, actually, Riley. So things were sort of quiet from midnight till about 6 or 7 a.m. Less activity than we might have been used to. There are often airstrikes at sort of 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning as the Israelis try to soften things up in preparation for any troop advancements that they're trying to make. But in the last little while, we've had airstrikes on 2 locations, towns in the district of Tyre and also in Nabatea. And just in the last couple of minutes, in fact, the Israeli military has issued a wide-ranging forced evacuation order for more than 20 locations. That's in the districts of Nabatea and in Jazeera. Multiple people in towns and villages, they're told to evacuate immediately for their safety. And so we're not seeing any kind of slowdown that some people might have hoped for here in Lebanon on the ground with this speculation, and more than speculation, in fact, assurances from the Iranian side that Lebanon would indeed be included in this ceasefire and this memorandum of understanding.
Heidi, has there been any official reaction in Lebanon from officials there on all of this diplomacy that's going on?
In a word, Riley, no. And part of the reason for that is that Lebanese officials, the Lebanese people, in fact, have learned that, these assurances, even announcements from people who are involved in negotiating the deal, people who are party to these deals between the US and Iran, doesn't necessarily mean that will be borne out on the ground. Back on the 8th of April, when the US and Iran first negotiated that ceasefire, we had announcements from people who were in the room. The Pakistani Prime Minister, who facilitated those negotiations, said that Lebanon was included in the deal. The Israeli Prime Minister then pushed back, and that led to the deadliest day of the war so far here. Israel struck more than 100 locations inside 10 minutes on the 8th of April. And so people here have learned that until some kind of deal is signed, until we see the text, not to take those assurances on board. And as I was just mentioning, yes, the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has said that Lebanon is included in the deal, that it involves a ceasefire. In fact, that they've made it clear to their counterparts that the memorandum of understanding also stipulates an Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon. The Israeli Defense Minister, Israel Katz, late on Friday afternoon said that no, in fact, Israel will not be withdrawing from Lebanon. Further, it won't be withdrawing from Syria or indeed Gaza. And so until the text of that deal is signed, until it is published, until there is some kind of Israeli acknowledgement, and the Israelis have also made it clear that they're not actually a party to this. This is between the US and Iran. And while senior US officials in calls with reporters on Friday were saying that their understanding is that their allies were on board, until it's signed, until it's published, people here will be waiting nervously and watching this continued and in fact expanding Israeli military activity in the south of the country.
Al Jazeera's Heidi Pett reporting live for us from Beirut. Heidi, thanks.